So we're going to start with Sean Clinton of the Irish Friends of Palestine against Lisbon. Sean.
I'm going to stand up, if you don't mind. Good evening, everybody. I'm just going to concentrate on one particular aspect of the Lisbon Treaty, and that's the foreign policy implications for Ireland, and in particular for the human and political rights of the Palestinian people. The other speakers will no doubt deal with many other aspects of the treaty that are detrimental not only to the Irish citizens, but to the other 495 million citizens of Europe who will be denied their basic democratic right to express their opinion about this treaty. EU foreign policy is decided in a two-tier structure. The European Council, that's the heads of state, prime ministers and presidents. They define the general political directions, priorities, and lay down the basic strategies of how the EU interacts with other countries and states. The EU Council of Foreign Ministers, that's the foreign ministers from all the 27 states. They decide EU policy based on the general guidelines defined by the heads of state. At present, the Council acts in unanimity. Therefore, we all have a veto. Ireland has a veto over European foreign policy. Our political leaders at home and in Europe, and in the glossy booklets promoting the Lisbon Treaty, tell us that the EU's actions are guided by 5 shared values: human dignity, liberty, the rule of law, democracy, and respect for human rights. For our political leaders, these values are mere window dressing that can be cast aside to suit the political agenda and interests of the larger states. The hypocrisy of European foreign policy and the vacuous rhetoric that surrounds it is starkly exposed when we examine the EU's record of economic and political support for the rogue state Israel. In 1995, the EU signed a trade agreement with Israel that granted privileged access and reduced tariffs on its exports to the EU, its largest trading partner. Article 2 of that agreement, described as an essential element of the agreement, states that relations between the parties shall be based on respect for human rights and democratic principles. Israel has never abided by that essential part of the agreement since the day it was signed. The EU has ignored it and never enforced that part of the agreement. The European Parliament twice voted to suspend the agreement following gross human rights violations by Israel when its forces attacked refugee camps in the West Bank and Gaza, killing hundreds of defenceless Palestinians. The EU Commission ignored the will of the Parliament on that occasion and refused to suspend the agreement. Respect for human rights, one of the EU's founding values, was brushed aside to facilitate Israel. Since 1967, Israel has transplanted over 400,000 of its citizens onto Palestinian lands in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and continues to do so today with these settlements despite the protestations of the international community. The transfer by an occupying power of its population into occupied territory is a war crime under the Geneva Conventions. The EU turns a blind eye to this. In the wake of the 2006 elections that were universally accepted as free and fair expression of the democratic will of the Palestinian people, Hamas won a majority of the votes and seats. At the behest of Israel and its supporters, the EU refused to deal with the newly elected government. Instead, it placed impossible preconditions on the Hamas-led government, conditions it did not impose on the regime in Israel. Democracy, a shared value of the EU, was brushed aside to facilitate Israel. 4 months after the election, Israel kidnapped 49 members of the newly elected Palestinian government and imprisoned them without charge. They remain in Israeli prisons to this day, held under administrative detention. For the EU leaders, the political and human rights of their fellow parliamentarians in Palestine can be ignored. Liberty, democracy, the rule of law, and respect for human rights are brushed aside again to facilitate Israel. Since 2006, Israel has been imposing a devastating siege on the residents of Gaza, described by our own Minister Ahern as collective punishment, a war crime under the Geneva Conventions. That siege is ongoing, yet the EU takes no action. Another example of how liberty, the rule of law, respect for human rights can be brushed aside to facilitate Israel. Last year, Israel conducted a series of deadly incursions into the besieged Gaza Strip. The area was bombarded from land, sea and air over a 5-month period. Over 380 Palestinians, including 60 children, were killed between January and June 2008. The EU took no action to rein in Israel. On the contrary, on the 16th of June, 4 days after we rejected the first Lisbon Treaty referendum in Ireland, 4 days after our political leaders had been trumpeting the values of how the EU respected the values of human rights and all the other shared values, the EU Council of Foreign Ministers, meeting behind closed doors in Luxembourg, decided to reward Israel and upgrade relations with it even further. Our Minister for Foreign Affairs, Micheál Martin, to his eternal shame, voted in favour of that decision. Not even the murder of 60 Palestinian children could halt the EU's determination to facilitate Israel's every wish. That upgrade of EU relations with Israel emboldened Israel, safe in the knowledge that the EU would shelter from all sanctions regardless of any gross violations of human rights. Israel launched another deadly assault on the residents of Gaza prior to its own national elections earlier this year. Electioneering Israeli style was how Tom McGurk described it in the Sunday Business Post. For 22 consecutive days and nights, Israel bombarded beleaguered people in Gaza, killing over 1,417, including 315 children. White phosphorus and nail bombs rained down on defenceless prison and besieged men, women and children. Thousands were burned, blinded and maimed for life in a ghetto that has neither the facilities nor the means to care for these people. Israeli state terrorism reached a new plateau, and still the EU continued to promote economic and diplomatic relations with this belligerent. These are but a few examples of how the EU foreign policy is at variance with the values shared by the people of Europe. European foreign ministers who decide our foreign policy in this manner can do so because EU foreign policy has no legally defined parameters. It does not have to conform to any international law, legally binding EU agreements, the UN Charter, not even the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights, with the exception of when they decide foreign policy legislation. Furthermore, the Lisbon Treaty, Article 27, explicitly states that the Charter dealing with foreign policy shall not be subject to the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice.